I'm Alexia Russell, and today on The Detail, an update on Ukraine.
A combined Russian missile and drone attack on the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv, has killed at least 14 people and wounded 44 others. The strike said to have hollowed out a residential building and destroyed dozens of apartments. Emergency workers at the scene rescuing people from under the rubble. Explosions could be heard for hours throughout the night across Kyiv.
Drone attacks on multiple air bases.
One of the boldest attacks by Kyiv since Russia's invasion.
Ukraine says they've hit 41 aircrafts. The Western estimates believe that at least 12 aircrafts were destroyed and up to 20 in total were damaged or destroyed.
Drone attacks deep into enemy territory, underwater mines collapsing bridges, clever sabotage, and then retaliation from Russia in the form of banned cluster munitions being used on civilians. The globe's spotlight may have swivelled to the Middle East, but the war in Ukraine is now into its fourth year and there's no let-up. And 5 days a week, the UK's Telegraph produces a podcast on it.
There's so much going on. We've never struggled to find content each day.
This is Dom Nichols, former British Army, and now the Telegraph's Associate Editor of Defence and reporter for the award-winning podcast Ukraine, The Latest.
There's always something happening on the battlefield. But as we've discovered over the last 3 years of doing this, there's just a great appetite around the world to learn about Ukraine, the history, the culture, the people, the food, the politics.
What is it about Ukrainians that everyone wants to sort of help out or know about what's going on?
Well, I think a number of things. Firstly, it's just such an egregious assault on where humanity is in the 21st century. This is Russia's invasion. I mean, it just seems so boringly old school. We've seen this stuff in black and white movies. This is Second World War stuff and Hitler. And you want to do what? You want to invade another country and kill a load of people for ego? And I mean, it's just so bizarre. I thought we were past that. So that's kind of taken everyone by surprise.
Do you think this all is about Putin's ego, or the excuses like, Ukraine wanting to join NATO and reclaiming land and creating a passage to the sea? Are these tenable excuses, or is it really, really just boiled down to one man's ego?
Yeah, I think so. I really do. I think it's that straightforward. He's trying to be Peter the Great. He's trying to be a Tsar. He's thinking about his legacy. He's trying to recreate the Soviet Union, and then he cherry picks from history, a classic sort of Russian and Soviet way of doing things. Just make it sound as if you're deeply philosophical and you've thought about this a lot and you've taken on board all different viewpoints. But actually, you're just cherry picking. He's just cherry picking from history to make the case for whatever warped argument he wants, and all this stuff about NATO expansion and it's all nonsense. And then to have a power such as Russia, which throws so much of the post-Second World War architecture into flux. So the UN, for example, and the whole model of trying to temper the worst excesses of the human condition. So we have the United Nations, we have the Security Council, and we have the permanent members of the Security Council. And here we have one of those permanent members invading another sovereign state. So it's such an assault on the senses and where we thought we were in the 21st century that it's an absolute wake-up moment to remind ourselves that we're actually not too far away from some of the people that we might look back on in history and think, God, they were pretty backward in their times and their moral values. I mean, for me, this war is just very few things in life are black and white, but for me, this one pretty much is. It's just wrong. What Russia's done is wrong. It's absolutely disgraceful. It's diabolical. And when you see it firsthand, and we visit Ukraine quite a lot. We got back in fact, this time last week, came back from our last visit out there. When you actually see it and you can see the lies that Russia says and actually what is happening on the ground, it is just such an affront to humanity that it's a very clear moral cause for me. It never dims, and I think that's been reflected in our listeners. Our numbers amazingly have never gone down. I hear the phrase Ukraine fatigue and war fatigue and what have you, but I can assure you that if the numbers for our podcast is anything to go by, that simply isn't what we've experienced.
How many people you got listening every day?
Well, it kind of depends. We never go below 100,000 a day.
Wow.
And we kind of hover between there and about 150. And if there's a big event, we get a spike up to about 250,000.
A big event like the recent drone operation or the drama between Presidents Trump and Zelensky.
US aid to Ukraine has been suspended. The White House putting a pause on military assistance to the country until it says they feel that Kyiv is committed to finding a peace deal. US President Donald Trump once again criticised Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky, saying he should be more appreciative.
Since the full-scale invasion by Russia of Ukraine 2022, you had about $66 billion in pure military aid delivered to Ukraine from the United States. In addition to that, and we don't talk about this as much, you had about $174 billion in financial and humanitarian aid.
Is there a danger that America's change of stance on this war could lead to disaster for Ukraine?
Well, yeah, it could do. I mean, Ukraine has been feverishly working to get itself away from the United States so that if there was a complete removal of support, both materiel and intelligence support, could Ukraine continue to wage the fighting side of this war? And obviously war is much bigger than just the battlefield stuff. So they've been working hard to get away from that.
On June 1st, Ukraine attacked 4 Russian air bases deep inside of Russian territory in a daring operation that was dubbed Operation Spiderweb. Beyond its strategic value, this was also a symbolic way for Zelensky and for Ukraine to say to Trump that they still have cards in this war.
You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
They're nowhere near that yet, particularly in terms of air defence. But they are doing their bit, the spiderweb that we're going to talk about in a little bit. I do believe that the US had absolutely nothing to do with that, and they didn't know about it. So now Ukraine are busy doing what they can to get away from the United States. Now, if Trump not just removes support from Ukraine, but adds support to Russia by, for example, removing some of the sanctions on Russia, that is very, very serious. And there's nothing that suggests that is completely off the cards. So no, I mean, Donald Trump's desire for chaos and willingness for chaos and his love of the big man theory of history and sort of, slapping big guys, had lots of bear hugs and handshakes and all this kind of stuff. He comes from that side of politics. I could see him continuing to court Putin. He has to throw a bone every now and again to the Ukraine-supporting wing of what's left of the Republican Party and the rest of the world as well. So every now and again he'll say something like, "I'm really angry with Putin. He's gone crazy."
I'm not happy with what Putin's doing. He's killing a lot of people, and I don't know what the hell happened to Putin. I've known him a long time, always gotten along with him. But he's sending rockets into cities and killing people, and I don't like it at all. Okay?
And quick as a flash, does nothing about it whatsoever. So he'll make these statements every now and again, and some of the more hopeful members of the press will pick up on it and go, Donald Trump's about to stick it to Putin. He's never going to do that. He's never going to do that. I think the most that Zelensky can hope for is that Trump is just a distracted and bored supporter and will allow Zelensky to buy weapons. So there's enough money sloshing around. The fund, the ways to support Ukraine is just give them military stuff, give them humanitarian supplies, and give them cash. And there's enough cash there, and it's growing, the pot of just pure cash for Zelensky to go on the open market and buy Patriot missiles, for example. That can happen. And if that's what it has to be, if it's just purely transactional with the United States, fine. I think Ukraine would take that deal tomorrow, and that may well be the best they can hope for the next couple of years to just have a purely transactional. They'll go and buy the stuff. Now, stand fast. The intelligence support, that is a different problem set, which can't just be bought off the shelf, and that could be very problematic. Although I don't think that would be terminal. Spiderweb, I think, was launched without immediate US intelligence support. I'm talking satellites and things like that. So I think, if Ukraine could get into a position where they're just on nodding terms, almost a bit kind of, a workable divorce where they might just sort of nod to their former partner and try and remember the good old days, but don't get into too much discussion because it quickly descends into a row. But if it just allow it to sort of buy weapons, I think they'd be content with that. Maybe not happy, but I think they'd be content.
All right, now that you've destroyed your chances of ever getting into America again, let's talk about spiderweb, because it was one of those amazing things that brought the whole conflict into sharp relief again. Quite an incredible use of technology and sneakiness on Ukraine's part to cause some major damage.
The operation involved Ukraine smuggling over months, over 117 drones, hiding them inside wooden containers and then loading them onto trucks. Then unwitting Russian truck drivers were remotely hired by Ukrainian operatives to drive the containers thousands of miles to different Russian air bases. And then at the same time, the wooden containers opened up and these drones flew out as they were approaching Russian airfield.
Have we ever seen this sort of thing in warfare before?
Yes, I'd say so. I mean, that blend of technology, ingenuity, amazing operational security, to be able to get this stuff into Russia in good order, well organised, well arranged, and then all launch at the same time. That was amazing. And we have seen similar things before. And this did have a strategic impact in that it probably, we don't know the exact numbers, we think it took a chunk of about a third out of what's left of Russia's long-range bomber fleet. We think Russia's probably got about 50 or 60 long-range bombers. I'm talking the Tupolev, the Tu-95s, the Tu-160, the Tu-22s. So probably about 50 or 60 of those in an airworthy condition. Now, they won't all be serviceable at the same time. Of course, you should expect about maybe half to be serviceable at any one time. And of course, some of those bombers, certainly the big Tu-160s, the backfire, NATO codename backfire, Russia has to keep them separate because they're part of their airborne nuclear firing capability. So they won't be risked at all. So even from what's left in the forward fleet, some are going to be squirreled away and said, right, you can't risk them. So from the ones that are left, we think Ukraine destroyed 12, 13, 14, something like that, and damaged maybe 15 or 20 others. And the damage might be significant because they don't make the 95s anymore and the 22s. So they're going to have to cannibalize other bits and pieces. So this was a very significant attack in terms of the impact on the bomber fleet. But it did so much more than that. And that was why this is one of the greatest operations, certainly of this war. And I think it will be remembered in history because of what it did for morale and what it did to make the world go, those that had doubted Ukraine say, they did what? Those funny little Ukrainians, they've done what? I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. It really does show that they have agency in this. And they're not just the poor little souls that are fighting with our weapons, and they're doing their best and good luck to them. But actually, they're not. They can't really do it, can they? Well, this has turned that argument right on its head. So, in terms of great operations in history that had such an impact on morale, I'm thinking one that kind of leaps to mind is the Dam Busters raid, 1943.
Simply bombing the huge concrete dam structures was deemed impossible. Inspired by playing with skimming stones as a child, assistant chief designer at Vickers, Barnes Wallace, came up with the idea to develop a skimming or rather a bouncing bomb. His idea was to drop a heavy bomb from an aircraft and let it bounce towards the dam in order to bring it right up close to the dam wall, let it sink and then detonate at the dam's weak spots at the base below the water surface.
So the technology was amazing. It had never been done before. And then the impact on the Germans, on the German industry was significant for a short time. They then repaired everything and got it going again. But I wouldn't say that's beside the point because that's very important as well. But actually what that did for morale in Britain at the time, the dark days, 1943, was immense. And I think Spiderweb, it can be seen through that lens very much so. As well.
My calculations, you're looking at about 33 planes destroyed. Ukraine said 41. Is that kind of like a wartime exponential number?
Yeah, well, they say 41 destroyed, and I don't think that means they were all smoking hulks on the tarmac. I think that was the kind of low double figures. But as I say, if you've significantly damaged them, such that they don't make the engines anymore, and they're going to have to take an engine from one of the other aircraft. You effectively have destroyed it because you then can't fly it.
The Russian Air Force sounds a bit like the New Zealand Air Force, bastardising bits of planes to fix other bits of planes. I mean, I thought they were supposed to be a mighty fleet and a great big war machine. Is this kind of exposed that they're kind of running on the smell of an oily rag?
Yeah, it's just that the oily rag is very big. I mean, they've burnt through their frontline stocks of tanks and armoured fighting vehicles, armoured personnel carriers, that kind of thing, months, if not years ago. They've still got tanks, but they're pulling them out, in some cases, literally from museums. They've got a lot of old war stock. I mean, I joined the British Army in 1992 and started doing armoured fighting vehicle recognition, AFV recognition. How do I recognise a tank? And we were looking at T-54s, as in they were Russian tanks built in 1954. Well, they're coming out now. We're seeing them. So they've got a lot of this old kit. They're producing some new tanks, but not many per month, and obviously per year. But they are refurbing old kit and dragging old kit out from some of their storage. And guess what? It's all pretty clunky, and those things that can actually move under their own steam don't have thermal sights. They don't have great armoured protection. They don't have all the whiz-bang gizmos of modern kit. So they get knocked out quite quickly. So Russia has still got the oily rag, as I say, and it's big. But yeah, there's a finite number, and it's very old. Ukraine's suffering as well. They're struggling for armoured vehicles. They're fighting a largely defensive battle. They're not really able, apart from local counterattacks and things like that, they're not really able to go on the major offensive, not since the autumn of 2022, when there was that mad dash around the northeast of the country, sort of east of Kharkiv, when there was that sort of incredible forward movement there over a few days. I mean, Ukraine can't really go forward. They've largely used up all their vehicles as well. And it's easy to say, right, well, let's give them a load of our vehicles. Let's give them a load of spare kit that the Brits aren't using or what have you. Having the equipment is one thing, but you've got to know how to fix it. You've got to know how to operate it. Does it use the same oil as the other vehicle you've got over there? And if it doesn't, then that's a problem for you. So, just giving them stuff, giving them equipment isn't always the answer. That acquisition of armoured vehicles has not been a priority for Ukraine in the last couple of years. Acquisition of surface-to-air missiles and other air defence assets definitely has, but armoured vehicles, in order to go on the offensive in a kind of manoeuvrist warfare style, has not been a priority for them.
Are they better at utilising new technology, at getting sneaky?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, back to the old phrase, necessity is the mother of invention. I think that's very much where Ukraine has been. But also, they do have a much more innovative population, I believe. So that's kind of baked into the Ukrainian character to a much greater degree, I think, than it is in Russia. So they're more willing to learn, try, fail better, fail faster, all the good cries, and then you eventually find a winning. It's very Darwinian. You find what works, and then you back that and you make that bit better. Russia doesn't do that. They do adapt. I wouldn't say it's a learning organisation, but it just a bit like a super tanker. It takes a while to change course and adopt new strategies and new tactics. But the Russian army is much more bureaucratic, much more top down. The big boss comes up with an idea and everyone goes, "Oh, that's brilliant," and then goes and does it. No one challenges the idea, and certainly no one puts ideas up from the bottom and says, "Hey, boss, do you think is that the best way we should? Why don't we try this?" That culture just doesn't exist in the Russian army. So I think, Ukraine is just much more. It's had to be much more inventive. What stage do Russia's backers, the oligarchs, when do they say to Putin, "You're no longer good for business"? Yeah, it's almost impossible to know, because he's demonstrated that he's not good for business now. It's when enough of them feel that way and are able to talk to each other and believe that they're talking in confidence with each other and they're not going to be dobbed in. So it's very, very difficult to tell when that's going to happen. But if you can't get to your money, and if you can't have your kids educated in London, and you can't go and see your mistress in south of France, and you can't go and play around on your yacht and all that kind of stuff, gets a bit dull. So at what point do they think this guy's not good for business, as you say? And that's what it'll be. It'll be when they feel that they're no longer able to enjoy their hard-earned, lawfully earned millions, billions. But it's the self-organisation side of it that is stopping that happening. they don't know, even if you are an oligarch and you feel that way, you don't know how many other people do feel that and who you can talk to about it for fear. I mean, this is what autocrats and bullies have done. This is what a mafia state is. You lead through fear, and it's very difficult to self-organise in that, and try and get a palace coup going in that sort of environment.
Dom, on balance, who is winning this war?
Well, define winning.
After 3 years of what was supposed to be a war that lasted a few days, Russia controls just 20% of Ukraine, has suffered casualties approaching 1 million, has devastated its economy, destroyed its international standing, reinvigorated its adversaries, and has no viable path to actual victory.
In the dark days of February, March 2022, just Ukraine existing as a sovereign entity with an effective government still in power, a president that's alive, and a society that's supportive of the war effort. That, I think, many people at the time would have said, right, yeah, let's have that. That's what we want. Well, that's kind of where we are now. They've currently about 19% of the country is held by Russia, and President Zelensky's been very clear that they're never going to just accept the loss of those eastern regions. So, does that mean that they're losing? Well, look at it from the other way. I mean, Putin thought he was going to be in Kyiv in days, weeks at most. By no means has he achieved any of his aims there. He's almost bankrupted his country. He's wiped out a generation of people who are going to work, or who can no longer work in the factories in Russia and generate the income. So, the question about, is this a war or is this the war? Is this the war you break your country over to win? For Ukraine, it probably is, because it's existential, and it's now that question is being pushed in the face of Vladimir Putin. Is this the war? Are you seriously prepared to break your whole country? You're going to kill a load more people to try and see this thing through? If the answer is yes, well, keep doing what you're doing. But if the answer is no, because you want to keep some forces back for this great, come the day when NATO piles in, or you have military aspiration elsewhere, or you want to keep some soldiers around so that you personally are safe and secure, then you might want to think twice about what's happening now, 3 years into this thing. So, as I say, define winning, but you could see how both sides are winning and both sides are losing as well.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and New Zealand On Air. This episode was produced by Gwen McClure and engineered by Jeremy Ansell. Thanks to Dom Nichols from The Telegraph. I'm Alexia Russell. Ka kite anō.